Funding for This Is Nashville comes from you, our listeners, and Music City Prep Clinic, Nashville-based provider for PrEP and offering comprehensive sexual health services in an environment designed to be safe, professional, and shame-free. Learn more at musiccityprep.org.
I'm Blake Farmer, and this is Nashville. It is our weekly Roundabout, the Roundabout, we've decided, where we bring you perspectives on the biggest headlines of the week. We span left, right, and center with the perspectives on this panel. It's also your turn to talk. You help us connect the dots. Tell us about a story that's not getting enough attention. It's not got the attention of this roundtable, or maybe it's getting too much attention. We're welcome to hear that as well. The number to join the conversation on air is 615-760-2000. If you're feeling a little shy, don't want to be on the air, well, make a comment on our YouTube stream. We are streaming from the studio right now. Thanks for tuning in. It's a fun way to join the conversation. Just pop in and comment on the live stream at youtube.com/@WPLN. That's Nashville Public Radio's YouTube page. All right, our Roundabout panel today. Let's meet them. We have Maryam Abou-Fazly, a former Democratic candidate for Congress and founder of the nonprofit Rise and Shine TN. Mark Rogers, a Republican advisor. Andrea Williams, an opinion reporter with the Tennessean. Thank you all for joining this panel.
Thanks for having us.
All right, so some items we'll touch on this hour. The high-profile detainee and federal defendant Kilmar Abrego Garcia is asking for his human smuggling charges to be dismissed, calling the prosecution vindictive in a filing this week. So this is a case related to a wrongful deportation by the Trump administration in March. The inciting incident there is from 3 years ago, pulled over in Putnam County, neither ticketed nor arrested, but with 9 passengers in the back of his vehicle. He could be freed in the coming days, though the question is whether Immigration and Customs Enforcement might just scoop him right back up on his way out the door. Nashville Pride, the organizers, are sounding the alarm after losing even more corporate support than they expected. Nearly 40% of longtime sponsors withdrew. Even Vanderbilt Medical Center, just weeks before the festival, pulled annual staffing for the medical tent. The organization's about $300,000 in the hole and planning a fundraising push to fill the gap. We'll talk about that. And Tennessee's been named as the 10th least affordable state for college grads. Nashville among the least affordable cities for recent college grads, with a more than $6,000 gap between the cost of living and the typical earnings for someone fresh out of college. We have nods in the studio here today. The only cities that fared worse, I found interesting in this analysis by upgraded points, were in California and Florida, and I bet you can name them. Memphis, on the other hand, leaves recent college grads, by their calculation, with about $2,000 in their pockets if you compare the local cost of living with what people there make coming out of school. So if you'd like to join the conversation on this and other topics, 615-760-2000, or join us on the YouTube stream. All right, Mark, Abrego Garcia, this saga is really kind of just our local flashpoint with the White House's crackdown on immigration. I read with interest this article you suggested this week from the Hill's political editor. Kind of talks about how Republicans and Democrats have been using immigration as a political weapon for like 15 years and makes great points about that, almost misreading tight elections as a reason to swing harder to the left and to the right, and all in this back and forth. And then he writes, having masked ICE agents tearing down protest signs and tasering food delivery guys was not what persuadable voters were looking for in 2024, nor were they principally thinking about building a network of detention camps or mass deportations of those who haven't committed other crimes. So I guess my question to you is, do you see any signs that in Tennessee anyway, that at this moment we could break out into some sort of bipartisan agreement on a more balanced approach to immigration?
No.
Yeah, why not?
Because the American political dynamic rewards extremism on both sides.
Yeah.
Yes, I don't know many people who voted for deportation of everyone who was here as an undocumented immigrant. But I also know that I don't know many people who voted for effectively an open borders policy in 2020. But when the extremists are driving both parties, that's what you get.
Yeah. Let's say on the state level, is there any way to start pulling back from that?
Probably not.
Yeah.
Because again, there are not enough people in the middle who will vote against extremists on either side to make it worth a candidate risking getting zapped by a hardcore, highly organized group of extremists to stand for sensible compromise.
Andrea, do you think that people really are mostly in that middle, that they're not looking for either extreme?
I do, yeah. And I think it's important that we frame this immigration conversation in light of what is generally happening politically, what has been happening politically. Because I do think most people are in the middle. I think, to Mark's point about what is happening with extremists on either side, like we're celebrating. We globally are celebrating Gavin Newsom now because he is pulling out Trump's tactics. And it's like, I don't know, even people on the right thought that was great, that Trump was doing that. But it was just like, this is the candidate we're aligned with, even though we don't align with these particular tactics. So that
I want to make sure I understand what you're saying. Are you saying that people you think generally people like what Gavin Newsom is doing and kind of throwing Trump's tactics back at him with redistricting? Or you're saying that's where we are? They're sort of matching wits. Yeah,
there's matching of wits, certainly. This sort of, I'm going to tit for tat on social media with you. And there are folks on the left who are celebrating that and who are saying, yes, this is what we need. We need a fighter.
And I think even Barack Obama this week said, for this time and this moment.
But I'm saying generally voters, I don't think that's going to fly because I don't think that people celebrated it when Trump did it. It's just that this is the war that we're in now, and this is the best way to engage in battle, even though that's not going to move voters.
Yeah, Miriam, you've run for office. Is there a way to not take an equally extreme position on some of these topics?
Depends on where you are.
Yeah.
I think in CD5 and in Tennessee, people that voted for these policies in whatever version they were voting for, because it was certainly sold differently than it is in implementation, and I will 100% support that they were sold something very differently.
You're saying people who decided to vote, let's say for Donald Trump here, that even they would never have guessed it would go this far.
No, I think it was sold as like criminals are raping your children and we're going to get them out of here. And I know my competitor on the other side was saying that kind of stuff. And no one was saying the guy that's delivering your food to you or building your house or fixing your toilet or going to school with your kids is also out of here. And so, but I haven't seen, at least in our world in Tennessee, that going very moderate yet.
Yeah.
I don't. It is painful, I think, and difficult for folks, but they haven't morally stood up in the way that I would think that they would need to stand up to say no to it. And so, whereas Mark is saying like the middle doesn't get a voice because both parties go right and left, I also think the middle is being heavily manipulated by the media that they're consuming. And so kind of, because in the election I was in, 200,000 voted for the other side, 140,000. So that's 200,000. Many would probably identify as the middle that went that direction, thinking that it was something that they could get on board with.
Mark, is it I don't know what Abrego Garcia's case will ultimately reveal. I mean, I don't know that we know all the facts about what's going on, but let's say the kind of cases that we, at least from afar, are hearing about and thinking, wait, is this the kind of person we were trying to deport? Are those stories enough to get people who, are pretty firm on tamping down illegal immigration? Is it enough to get them to rethink their own positions about what a mass deportation really could benefit?
I think Abreu Garcia is probably a bad example because there is so much uncertain about the original arrest and whatever happened. The truth is that if the Trump administration had simply brought him back and sent him to someplace else, then everything would have been fine and this would have been a non-story. Yeah. Instead, they chose to fight on that hill, and here we are. And it's distorting the discussion of the more serious thing, which is things like in Los Angeles, there are multiple examples of citizens being swept up and arrested, sometimes violently, who were citizens.
Oh, in other words, they're not even immigrants of any kind.
Yes, it is essentially they are being targeted either for speaking Spanish or for being brown.
I mean, with all due respect, we had that here too.
Yeah.
We had literal checkpoints. 500 something plus people were pulled over. 196 of them were actually arrested or taken. And then some smaller percentage of that actually had a case that was even worth looking at. So we started it. We're kind of the trend starter on it. I just think it's really important to contextualize in Tennessee. But I think but I will say, like Andrea was saying, there is a voter that is not voting, that did not vote in 2024 that I saw. And it's very important for us to know why and what is going on with them. Some would argue that they haven't had an extreme enough position, like a Mamdani, and some would argue that possibly that they're too extreme on both sides.
And
Yeah, go ahead, Mark.
having worked in a lot of elections since 1990, I can also tell you that anyone who says the American people or the people of the Tennessee 5th Congressional District or the citizens of Fairview voted for X is almost always incorrect.
Right.
People vote for a whole bunch of reasons, and one issue is rarely the thing. And certainly in 2024, that was not the only issue on which the election was determined. And so when people say, this is what I voted, well, yeah, but you look at the results. It's not that simple.
Yeah, there's nothing more fascinating than we call it voter voxing, talking to voters on their way out of the polls. And boy, you get a lot of answers about why they voted the way they did. And we're grateful for it because it reminds us, wow, the stories that we're telling are certainly not always the story that's in the voter's mind. If you'd like to join the conversation, the phone number is 615-760-2000. We'll even come back to something if we moved on, if you'd like to catch up or leave a comment on the YouTube stream. It's youtube.com/@WPLN. So the Nashville Pride Festival is one of many nonprofits dealing with a drop in corporate support as the White House goes after anything that might look like diversity, equity, inclusion, and all things like it. Andrea, I wonder, though, can you blame companies for almost wanting to stay out of that crossfire?
Yes, you can. I think companies should be held accountable if they have built an audience around certain initiatives or certain messaging. I think you can absolutely hold them accountable for that. I think for organizations like Nashville Pride or for organizations that support, Black folks, I think there always has to be that understanding that things are cyclical and that companies do tend to sway with the wind, right? Based on, curring political favor or where they think that they can make the most dollars and cents. So it's just a matter of really building out, whatever that messaging is, whatever that base is that can sort of withstand these moments. I think there are certain organizations or certain groups that understand this, in a way that maybe other folks haven't, right? Like, I think, certainly I used to work at the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum, and this, this idea of, are Black folks cool right now or are we not, is something that is always top of mind. And so you always have to understand that it could change at any moment, and you have to build up your base to sort of withstand that.
Are you saying, kind of broadly speaking, like, are the people who even aren't Black interested in seeing
That's
more
correct.
of the round?
That's correct. Yeah,
well,
for sure.
Well, like in 2020, obviously it was cool.
It was cool. There you go.
Yeah.
There you go.
Wow.
And a lot of people made a lot of money, got a lot of donations. But for folks who banked on that, I just think that would have been a silly proposition. And you got to have better advisors because that would have been dumb. That would have been dumb.
If you want to chime in on this, maybe you're an organization that's been victim of losing some of this funding. The number is 615-760-2000. But Andrea, to continue on that point, I've got to think that there at some point organizations have to decide, can we still go on? There was somebody in here who was talking about banks that are no longer, directing as much funding toward DEI type initiatives. So it's not even really very public yet. And talking about hearing from other nonprofits that are doing the very same thing. Are you saying they just need to kind of rethink the business model?
I think you have to rethink the business model. I think you also, and that's not to say the work doesn't need to be done or that it's not important, but I think you have to get really creative. And I'm saying this not, this is no easy task for sure. But and some of this certainly falls on the customer or the constituent or whoever it is you're trying to serve, right? And I think, you know, this could be a larger point for a lot of the topics that we're talking about today is how do you get people to care when it doesn't directly impact them yet, right? I have a friend who runs an organization for Black girls in gymnastics. And, you know, she's seen some of these funding issues and some of these struggles. And that's not to say that work is not important. You know, Black girls still are working, you know, in a predominantly white space in gymnastics. But how do you get people to care if, you know, they're sending their white daughter and that white daughter feels fine? Or how do you even get people to care who have maybe progressed beyond the sport or who have matriculated at some top level and maybe they're not being impacted by those issues as directly? So you have to get really creative to get people to care. And that's a global struggle. You know, we're going to talk about affordability in Nashville. This town was always inaffordable or unaffordable to somebody, to be clear. You know, that group has grown larger now that we're getting in folks from out of state, but there was always somebody priced out. Did people care then, or do we care now because it impacts them directly?
Yeah. Miriam, you know, Nashville Pride, which kind of sparked this conversation, they said in the coming weeks they're going to release a list of withdrawn sponsors so our community knows exactly who walked away and why some step backs hurt more than others. I wonder if is that kind of position helpful here?
Okay, so we have an attack on DEI from our government, right? I see government leaders, I see other groups saying, literally doing investigations on private universities, talking quietly about rebranding their DEI programs. That's up to them, but they're like, we caught, XYZ University saying that the Unity group is actually the DEI group. We caught them. Like they're doing something evil or wrong. I mean, the way that we have a fear tactic going right now that is terrifying. And so Pride has a lot of things going on and a lot of criticisms have been thrown at it over the last few years. But like many, I think, nonprofits, a lot of people preemptively started to change their language, their semantics, their branding, to not get attacked, to not lose their money, to not have the corporates get mad at them, right? I didn't love that. I don't really support that. Preemptive giving in is another way to just say you have the power that you think you have, right? So it doesn't sound like Pride did that, but they suffered consequences anyways. And yeah, the corporates are out because they're trying to cover their butts, like you said. The political tide has turned. You can go buy crypto from our president and get curry his favor that way. So it's a different client.
It's a different time.
So I don't know if that accountability for those corporates is important. Boycotting is having an impact, and as we saw with Target, so maybe that would help. But I also think that probably these really identity-based, cultural freedom-based, being able to who you are organizations really have to, unfortunately, think about how to be that moving forward, because this phase doesn't seem like it's going away anytime soon.
Yeah, we need to take our first quick break. When we come back, we'll dive into more of these headlines, and still to come, Tennessee Guardsmen deployed to D.C., a return of NASCAR to the fairgrounds maybe? Plus, we'll get a little insight into who our panelists are here. We're still taking your calls, 615-760-2000, or leave a comment on the YouTube stream at the Nashville Public Radio YouTube page. Stay with us. This is Nashville.
Funding for This is Nashville comes from you, our listeners, and Music City Prep Clinic, Nashville-based provider for PrEP and offering comprehensive sexual health services in an environment designed to be safe, professional, and shame-free. Learn more at musiccityprep.org.
I'm Blake Farmer, and this is Nashville. You know you've got a hot topic when we cut off the mics, and we keep having the debate right here in the studio. Sorry you didn't get to enjoy that, but we're going to keep talking. This is our weekly Roundabout. We have Maryam Abou-Fazli, former Democratic candidate and organizer, Republican advisor Mark Rogers, and opinion journalist Andrea Williams of the Tennessean. Our panel is intended to span left, right, and center. Not that issues neatly break down that way, as you see here on the air, but just give us a little. We're giving you a little insight into their points of view. We're going to go straight to the phones. If you'd like to call us to join us on air with a comment, the number is 615-760-2000. Right now, let's go to Sarah in Nashville. You're on the show. What are you thinking about?
Well, I mean, my question was about the Electoral College. So we were talking about, the right versus the left versus the middle voting. I don't really completely understand how the middle sort of gets represented through the electoral votes. And I just wonder, I felt like the vote for the middle kind of gets lost in that. And maybe I'm just not understanding how the Electoral College works.
Well, thank you for the question, Sarah. Mark, do you want to chime in here?
It's not that the Electoral College can effectively directly represent people in the middle. It's that people in the middle need to figure out how to leverage their votes to keep both parties more toward the center, which is the way we used to be. And now, thanks to things like high-tech gerrymandering and the existence of both a far left and far right media, which sort of live in fantasy land, you have a large block of people on both sides who have no reality that the majority of people exist in, but they vote, they're heavily organized, and they push the two parties. And so election results get skewed because there are only two options. And as one side gets crazier, the other side is free to get crazier because they can say, well, if you don't vote for me, you're going to get the other side.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, the gerrymandering I was going to definitely touch on. We've seen the drama playing out in Texas, and now the response on the left is to do it in California, which I get from a numbers perspective in Congress, but it effectively drowns out the middle. We all probably all of us, we live in districts where we know where it's going to go based on the fact that, the district has in fact been structured to carry a certain vote. And certainly now, as we have, at the federal level, we have each side going further right, further left, and that trickles down to the local level because everybody is campaigning based on their support at the federal level. It just totally wipes out that middle.
Yeah. Sarah, thanks for your call. Appreciate you chiming in here. We're going to take another call, getting back to this issue of funding for DEI, LGBTQ issues. Laura in Franklin, you're on This Is Nashville.
Hi. Well, my comment was basically, I think that a lot of groups lost the middle when they started to try to influence underage kids. When they started to move into the schools and the education, when they started to strongly influence kids on college campuses, I think that parents start to think to themselves, you know what, while I might be supportive of some of these issues, I am not supportive of the fact that they are going after my kids and trying to manipulate my kids.
Is there a specific issue, Laura, that you're thinking of that
I'm thinking of the educational programs in elementary schools, how they've started to put LGBTQ books in libraries, where parents are like, you know what, I want to be able to discuss these issues with my kids, not these groups that are trying to shape their thinking from an early age, or colleges where these social movements are trying to manipulate their kids to fight on their side when these kids haven't really studied these situations, these issues for themselves, but they're being manipulated into an almost like social movement army for these causes.
Yeah, Laura, we take your point. This is a good one for us to pick up. So I appreciate you chiming in here from Franklin. Miriam, I wonder if you could weigh in here because there are a lot of school board fights that have happened over curriculum, and a lot of times you drill down a little bit, and really there's some very small items that people are really talking about, or on a college campus, one particular class that kind of gets maybe twisted in the spin cycle of left-right media circles. But is there though something to this that folks are protective of their kids, even if they are open-minded about something on the progressive side?
I really struggle with this. I'm a mother of a 7-year-old in public school. And he brings me ideas and thoughts that are fed from peers and family and students all day, every day, all kinds of things. And we process them. We walk through them. Not direct, it's not all like, Mom, here's the download of what happened today. But, it comes out and we process them. And sometimes I'm like, whoa, why did he say that? Or, whoa, what? Somebody, and it's like, oh, my Lord, he's being exposed to all this stuff that I have no control over. And then I'm like, oh, welcome to today. Welcome to parenthood. So I have a lot of empathy for, and maybe as he gets older, I'll feel more of this experience. I read Toni Morrison as like required reading in high school. It made me smarter. I read, I don't know. We read a lot of books that are now considered banned in a lot of school districts. And it did not make me do or be anything other than more critical. So I'm really hesitant to blame teachers or a book or anything like that, because I have an open conversation with my kid that's processing all these things. And I'm in the public school system. I believe in it. It's tricky. I'm not saying it's perfect by any means, but I don't see the proselytizing, cult making that is being talked about by a book.
Yeah, I agree. I'm a mom of 4, and kids are definitely easily influenced, far too easily influenced, in my opinion. The reality, though, is that to the caller who was just on, she has a problem with what has happened recently in past years. And my assumption is that she would want to swing it, to the other direction, that there will be certain things that she would deem okay, that then we would have another voice saying, well, actually, I don't want my kid reading books about Christianity because we're a Muslim household. So the reality of the situation is, again, I'm saying this as a parent, that there is no right side. There's your side, and then there is their side. And so we have to be mindful of the fact that no matter which way we swing the pendulum, somebody's going to be mad on the other side, and we're going to swing it back. And so that's what we're dealing with now. There was probably a time 10 years ago where she was A-okay, but her feelings and her perspective isn't more important than anyone who said, actually, I want my kid to read books about Toni Morrison.
Mark, do you think we've seen the end of folks kind of fighting curriculum, getting down to critical race theory or whatever the things are that people kind of get bent out of shape?
Oh, God, no. There's too much to be gained politically by both sides in this. And again, here's an issue where in the old days, sane people could come together and say, books about gay people are something children should read about because they are going to interact with gay people. They're going to interact with Muslims. They're going to interact with libertarians. God help them. But but all these things are real. But at the same time, that sort of necessity does not mean you should have books that include graphic descriptions for 5th graders. And so I think that there is a solution, there is a compromise. At the same time, I also think that I wish a lot of the parents who spent their time worrying about what their children are being exposed to in schools would think about what their children are watching on their phones, on their computers, and on their tablets.
Yeah, well, there's that.
I mean, really?
No kidding. One of the let's jump to this headline. There was a big teacher satisfaction survey that came out this week. And I'm impressed, like 40,000 teachers on this. I mean, I think there are only 60 or 70,000 teachers in Tennessee. And they all responded. Well, one of their top issues was cell phone use in class and people cheating with their cell phones and being distracted by their cell phones and all of this. But that's totally understandable. Teacher pay was also kind of been a central topic, with folks saying they want to be paid better because the cost of living is going up. But also most of those teachers told the survey that they plan to stay in the classroom. So, Andrea, I wonder if I could start with you. Is teacher pay any bigger of an issue now than it always has been?
I think teacher pay is always going to be an issue as long as it is close to where it is now. That teachers just don't get paid enough. I don't really think that's an arguable point. I think most people would agree to that. I also think that for someone to sign up and want to go into schools and teach kids, that they're already kind of in a position where, they, I should say some. I do think we are definitely at a point where there are enough vacancies and enough issues in the job market overall that we do have people signing up to teach because it is a job. That's a reality, and those people are not as passionate as they should be. So I think that's probably the area where pay becomes that much of an issue. But I think there are people who love it and who are committed to it and who want to work with kids, and it matters less that the pay isn't great. A lot of times though, those people, they do have some buffer, right? They are married, and so they have a spouse that can help offset some of those costs. So there are a lot of factors there. But teachers just don't get paid enough. They just don't.
Well, let's hop to another topic, but if you'd like to chime in here, the number is 615-760-2000. We welcome your calls. So Tennessee Guardsmen will soon be joining patrols of Washington, D.C. Governor Bill Lee made Tennessee one of the first states to send National Guard troops to be part of the Trump administration's federal takeover of D.C. police, citing a surge in crime, even though it appears that overall crime rates have been falling for the most part. Mark, is the governor just trying to stay in the president's good graces? What's your read?
I think that there are plenty of other things the Tennessee National Guard could be doing, like being at home, taking care of their businesses and doing their jobs, and that D.C. Doesn't need the Tennessee National Guard, and it's just basically a waste of money.
Well, maybe what's your larger read on what President Trump is trying to achieve in D.C.?
I do think that he is concerned about the fact that D.C. does have a serious crime problem. I think there are probably other ways he could have gone about it, but clearly he likes the idea that he can do these things arbitrarily. Mm-hmm. And so that appeals to his self-image as the great businessman, the great leader. That
he can say the word and troops are out there on the street doing what he has said. Let's jump to a local issue. Metro Nashville has decided to audit the Davidson County Property Assessor's Office despite pushback from Assessor Vivian Wilhoit, who's been on this show. But the Metro Audit Committee this week unanimously approved the audit, calling it a routine review, though it's been 8 years since they've audited the agency. They're responding to concerns over record property value increases, on average 45% for properties in Davidson County, which of course means that some people will pay substantially more in property taxes starting this year. Wilhoit tells the Nashville Banner that the audit is politically motivated. Miriam, you've got this record increase of property appraisals, lots of grousing in my neighborhood about tax bills jumping. Is the real issue something else like affordability here?
Yes.
Yeah.
I cannot state how much we need to think about this, talk about this, analyze this, hear voices about this. This is the defining issue in our country right now, and it will be. And what is happening right now is that it's getting worse. Significantly worse. Affordability.
Cost of living.
Yes. I always think about it. Unfortunately, this kind of, we have two economies, and we have to learn to talk about the second one. We don't know how. When journalists, when media, when experts talk, they talk about stock markets. They talk about, labor markets, this type of thing. How do we talk about regular people economy? We got to talk about what people are paying for rents. How the so-called supply and demand of market economics is not working and is totally broken. We have to get better at what are the pieces of information we need to use to measure what we're doing. GDP is going to go down, which is bad. We are also have consumer prices are up, like grocery prices are up. It is hard to live in Nashville. And so, yes, while Vivian is the subject of this, and I don't know if it needs an audit or not, I think it's more just the reality of that sticker shock. But we all feel it. We feel it all the time. And, Andrea talked about it's always been around. Well, it's always been around, but as someone who's like born and raised here, this is extreme. The last 10 years has been extreme. We work a lot on housing issues, and something like 10 years ago, we needed 20 to 30,000 units of housing, and now we need 90,000 of regularly affordable housing to even meet the demand. So we have attracted all these people here, and we have almost no way to address it. And so, yeah, you can go after the property, but I think that what we really need to talk about is that it is not even possible for a middle-class person that does not have assets, that is not playing in the stock market, that does not have real estate to do okay in Nashville.
Yeah. Mark?
I think that everything you said is true about housing, and that is a much more important issue. However, I think that Metro does have some serious governmental problems. They periodically pop up where someone will investigate one of the offices and, oh my goodness, we've got this, this, and this. Nashville is a one-party organization, so I think it's incumbent on the Democratic Party to exert some authority to get in and be the tribune of the people, because clearly there are a lot of flaws in Metro government. If there weren't, we wouldn't have almost had the comptroller take over the city back in 2019. And I don't think one of the things is we're asked to pay more property taxes. Where are the cuts in Metro government? I mean, no one ever says we can eliminate these programs. We can reduce staff. It's always, oh my goodness, we must have more money to operate Metro government.
Yeah, and I think Mayor O'Connell has been pretty forthright that he thinks that is what should be done. But you're right. I think the people who are paying the tax bills this year, they're going to be considerably more, may have something else to say. We need to take one last break. And when we come back, listen, we're going to squeeze in as much as we can of these headlines. We're also going to take your calls. In fact, we'll start out with a call from Christian hanging on the line right here. All right, we've got Andrea Williams, Miriam Abel-Fazli, Mark Rogers in the studio. The number to call is 615-760-2000, or leave a comment on the video stream at the Nashville Public Radio YouTube page. Stay with us. This is the Roundtable on This Is Nashville.
Funding for This Is Nashville comes from you, our listeners, and Music City Prep Clinic, Nashville-based provider for PrEP and offering comprehensive sexual health services in an environment designed to be safe, professional, and shame-free. Learn more at musiccityprep.org.
I'm Blake Farmer, and this is Nashville. Well, you're back. This is our weekly roundabout where we talk about headlines of the week. We also take your calls, and we welcome you to join the conversation. The phone number is 615-760-2000. Get on this conversation. We've still got time to work in a few headlines. Going to talk about what's happening at the fairgrounds and the potential of NASCAR returning, as well as a few other items if we can get to them. We'll go straight to the phones. We've got Christian somewhere out there in Franklin to chime in on this. We've been talking about curriculum topics related to schools. What you got for us, Christian?
Yeah, I heard one of the callers earlier talk about how, there's an agenda with, one side, and it was kind of easy to tell early on what side of the issue she fell on, which is perfectly fine. She's allowed to have her opinion, of course. My point of view is, banning books and, trying to limit education to children is extremely harmful. I think you should raise curious children. I think you should be able to have open and honest conversations with your children and raise them in like a neutrally, morally right way. It doesn't have to be leaning to one side. It doesn't have to be this big, radical thing on any point of the political or, any spectrum, really. And the banning of education and educational materials does way more harm than good. Like it's a pattern that we've seen in other parts of the world and other parts of history. And I think that if you foster a safe environment for your child to ask questions and to be open and honest and be themselves, that you wouldn't have to worry about whatever material is out there because your child would know right from wrong regardless.
Yeah, I'll just jump in and say to the caller's point about an agenda, there's actually always an agenda. We get used to an agenda for a while, and then that becomes the norm or the default, but there is an agenda at play, right? The Daughters of the Confederacy decide that they want to insert history books with the sort of lost cause narrative. That's the agenda, even if the books remain that way for generations. And so then we have this other side that comes back in and says, actually, we need to move it this direction or that direction because we disagree. That's ultimately what we're dealing with now. And it sucks to be on that other side when you happen to disagree with what's happening. But that's the reality of the situation. And so, again, we need to find that point where we understand that silencing this other voice means your voice will later be silenced, or the possibility that your voice will later be silenced, and opening it up so we have a broad spectrum of views, even if you disagree.
Well, but you can see why, with what you're saying, it almost means, well, it is worth at the time having a deep discussion about what we're going to teach kids because it may be taught to them for quite some time.
Sure.
Yeah. Wow. Let's go to the fairgrounds. So next steps for the Nashville Fairgrounds and car racing there could happen soon, could soon become more clear anyway. An announcement is expected any day between Metro and Speedway Motorsports, which has been working for years to bring back NASCAR at the racetrack. Meanwhile, Axios Nashville reports a coalition that includes environmental and community groups wants a vote, like a referendum, to potentially block racing there on the site. Miriam, there's always a lot of tension with racing at the Nashville Fairgrounds. Is it just because this is like the culture wars popping up right in the middle of town or something?
If you're asking me, for me, again, this is another example. This is what I'm concerned about. This is what I'm going to harp on as like public resources not going to public goods. We do not need to be subsidizing private companies or corporations any longer, as far as I'm concerned.
Now, we do it all the time.
We do it all the time.
Okay.
I was an economics student in the late 90s, early 2000s, and a public administration student. And they were talking about privatization is more efficient. We should hand out contracts and get it. Now we're at, 25 years later, we are at some extreme of that where we no longer, as taxpayers, get the things that we're paying into because we've sort of been told that the Titans get a stadium and Speedway gets a track. And you're taught that, I think a lot of people think that is what taxpayer money's for. So while as I might agree with Mark and Andrea that we maybe our budget is quite big, I think a lot of things aren't paid for. I think a lot of public goods aren't taken. We used to get swimming pools. We used to get roads. We used to get, So
if you're gonna invest in something, make it that the entire public can use.
And especially I think we are being very civil in our conversation, but we're in a crisis right now, a serious both political and financial crisis that's coming. Some say that we're already in a recession if it wasn't for AI investment. I think we need to be talking about how precious this money is and what it needs to be going to make sure that our people are okay.
Yeah. And my understanding, of course, who knows what it would actually be, but there would be no commitment of city dollars here. But of course, it's city property. And
it's a public land.
It's public land. Yeah. Mark.
Well, first of all, there was a referendum a number of years ago, and overwhelmingly people said they wanted racing returned and improved at the fairgrounds.
Were you surprised by that?
No. The organizational support for Save the Fairgrounds was massive and bipartisan. But the reality, what I understand, is that this is not really about building affordable homes, and it's not really about parks. It's about creating a space where there can be a soccer stadium parking lot. Also, if I can add, that the soccer stadium would have to compete with the racetrack for concerts. And the NASCAR people are well known in the concert world for their competence at doing things like that. So the soccer stadium seems to be the people behind the soccer stadium seem to be the people who are really funding all of this. And somebody should look at the finances of the organization that's trying to push this referendum.
Well, we'll do some homework on that. By the way, last week, this is on me, not anybody else who's on this panel. This is all me. Last week we talked about how the state fair moved out to Wilson County 4 years ago, without also mentioning there is still a fair at the Nashville Fairgrounds. In fact, it starts September 5th. Aside from the usual midway rides, also has quite the rundown for the arena, from a cosplay contest to a couple of wrestling events. So that's the Nashville Fair at the Nashville Fairgrounds, which still is at the Nashville Fair. We've got just a little time for another phone call if you want to jump in on the conversation on this week's headlines. 615-760-2000. I'm going to, an episode of This is Nashville earlier this week dove into the deep end of fertility treatment. A new law protecting in vitro fertilization revealed just how uncomfortable some Tennessee lawmakers are with IVF. Tennessee became the first state in the South to specifically protect the fertility treatment, but not without this pretty intense debate over how the procedure leads to the destruction of human embryos in the process. Mark, I wonder, do you see folks who were fighting against abortion moving to regulate something like IVF?
Oh, definitely. Again, this is one of those things that is a philosophical, there's no middle ground. There are people who believe that a fertilized embryo is life, and there are people who believe that it isn't,
whether it's in a petri dish or not,
or in a woman, and so it's just not something that that lends itself to a compromise. And I don't think you'll see one until at least something else comes along that will attract the people involved to start fighting over that.
They're looking for a fight one way or the other.
They're looking for this is the Karenization of American politics.
Go on, explain.
Everybody needs large numbers of people need something to be outraged about.
Karen as in the name Karen.
Exactly, the
Karenization.
Yeah, and so I'm not saying there are not a lot of people who are principled and virtuous people who are about this, but what I'm saying is that on both sides, this is the kind of issue that gets used to stir up people, to move votes, and to raise money.
Yeah, people need something to be outraged about, and people don't really care about stuff until it impacts them directly. And so we saw this bill in the legislature to protect IVF. A similar bill was introduced last session by Democrats, didn't make a move. And so now you have women who've come up and who have been directly impacted by fertility issues, and now they want to push it through, even though they're on the right and even though they believe that a baby is a baby at conception. So ultimately, and this goes back to even what Miriam was talking about, I am going to forever endeavor say that if we are not looking at the least of these, I say this all the time in my column, the people at the very, very bottom, we could have addressed these or had better conversations about it before we got to crisis point. We started leaving people behind a very, very long time ago. We got to a point where we wanted Nashville to be this great big city. And so that just meant that we left more people behind. But had we addressed some of these issues before, we perhaps would not have ever gotten here.
We don't have time to open up a huge can of worms. So let's just return to the story we didn't hit at the top, which is about Tennessee being one of the least affordable states. And I actually think it kind of masks the cities that are, because Memphis is a quite affordable city on here. Nashville's one of the least affordable in terms of places to get out of college, get your first job, and try to make ends meet. The gap is like more than $6,000 for what a recent college grad would need. Is there something, Mark, that can be done, or is this just a thing that people like to complain about, but it's just what progress looks like?
Well, obviously, there could be some effort to have less expensive apartments, less expensive housing, which I think is something a lot of people want that would also benefit younger people who want to move here. The truth is, though, I think if you look, the majority of young people moving here are making enough money that the $6,000 gap doesn't even cause them to bat an eye. I mean, if you look at who's living in the apartments downtown, walking their dogs, these are people that are paying $2,000 for $2,000 a month or more for a 900 square foot apartment.
Yeah. So, but I guess the point is they may not be the average recent college grad. Andrea, what do you see?
Yeah. I mean, even that comment, this is who we're focusing on. This is who we're paying attention to. What's going to happen is that we won't get any. I don't think we're going to get to a point where we really make this town less affordable. I think we can't, put Pandora back into the box. What we're going to get is a wider gap between the haves and the have-nots, just like what you see in LA, just like what you see in New York. There will always be that bottom class, those folks on the margins who have to come and support everybody else that can afford the $3,000 apartment, but it's not going to get any better for them. And that is, I think, the cost of growth and of having, despite this being in this blue city, a city that determined who we were going to build for.
Well, thank you to this panel for our Roundabout episode, helping us chew on the headlines of the week. Miriam Abulfazli, a former Democratic candidate for Congress. Mark Rogers, a Republican advisor. Andrea Williams, opinion reporter with the Tennessean. We hope that you'll all come back.
Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in this hour. This is Nashville's a production of Nashville Public Radio. Today's episode was produced by Mary Mancini, directed by Tasha A.F. Lindley, who is also making us look good on the YouTube stream. Our board operator is LaTanya Turner, with help from Nate Smith over there. The masterminds behind our theme music you're hearing are LaRange and Namir Blade. Listen back at thisisnashville.org or wherever you get podcasts. We'd love for you to subscribe and rate us. It really does help. And if podcasts aren't your thing, but you do want to listen on your own time, here's a simple tip. Just ask a smart speaker, play the latest episode of This is Nashville. The conversation doesn't have to end here. You can comment, tell us what you want to hear on the show by leaving us a message at 615-751-2500. We're also on the socials at This is Nashville. This is Nashville. I'm Blake Farmer. Go in peace.